Imagine a corner of the Caribbean where the sun bathes the land with the same warmth as the gazes of its women. A place where English blends with Creole in conversations full of rhythm, where bodies move with a cadence born of desire, and smiles bloom among Maya ruins, coconut-scented palm trees. This is Belize, a small country with an expansive soul. A hidden gem that, unlike its more famous neighbors, keeps its charms almost secret, guarding them like a discreet lover waiting to be discovered by those who know how to look beyond the tourist map. Belize is not only the cheapest country in the Caribbean, it is also one of the most unexpectedly passionate. Here, romance does not hide. On the contrary, it strolls along the beaches in the bronzed forms of women, works in the markets amid juicy fruits, and is sipped in every draught of homemade liquor as the night ignites with garifuna drums and fire dances. But what is daily life like in this hidden paradise? What makes so many Belizean women seek love beyond their own borders? The answer lies in the details, in the exchanged glances on the rickety buses, in the playful comments tossed out in broken English or Caribbean Spanish, in the openness with which sensuality is lived in a country where poverty and hope coexist without shame. To understand this phenomenon, one must go beyond the landscape. One must explore the soul of Belize, and that begins with understanding its unique history. Belize was a British colony known as British Honduras. Its English heritage blends with a strong Maya, Mestizo, Creole, Garifuna, and Mennonite presence, creating a cultural crucible as dense as it is alluring. It is this convergence of identities that nourishes a freedom seldom found in more rigid societies. Here, social norms are more flexible. It is not unusual for women to take the initiative, to approach tourists with a mischievous smile, or to maintain relationships without the immediate pressure of marriage. In Belize, love is not bought with rings, but with time, gestures, sincere glances exchanged at a wooden bar overlooking the sea. Yet the phenomenon that surprises visitors most is how openly many Belizean women seek relationships with foreigners. It is not a secret or something hidden. It is part of the public conversation. The reasons are many, from disappointment with local men, who, according to some, often have multiple partners and few responsibilities, to the desire for a more stable life, a future for their families, or simply the curiosity of sharing different worlds. This search for love, far from being mercenary or superficial, is deeply rooted in the need for authentic connection in a country where economic opportunities are limited, but the heart is willing to risk everything for an intense story. The economic reality in Belize also feeds this scenario. It is one of the most affordable countries in the Caribbean. The cost of living is low, rents are cheap, and daily life does not require great luxuries to feel satisfied. But that same simplicity drives many people, especially young women, to seek escape towards something greater. Sometimes that escape comes in the form of solitary tourists stepping ashore with curiosity. Other times it is digital nomads, adventurers, or expatriates who decide to stay and, unexpectedly, discover they have been chosen by a woman with a bright smile and sweet words. But it is not only romantic love. In Belize, human relationships are built within community. It is common to see entire families sharing open spaces, cooking together over makeshift fires, or dancing at celebrations where the music does not stop until dawn. Women, strong by tradition, play a central role in this social structure. They are mothers, friends, sisters, but also conscious seductresses of their own power. And that power shows in the eyes of travelers who find themselves captivated not only by physical beauty, but by the way these women look, speak, and make you feel that, for a few days or weeks, you have found something impossible in Western routine: genuine attention, guilt-free desire, and a connection that defies time. One of the most emblematic areas of this warm, sensual atmosphere is Cay Caulker, a small island where shoes are unnecessary, the pace slows, and the motto is clear: go slow. There, among colourful cabins, reggae drifting through the air, and sun-tanned bodies, some of the most memorable encounters between locals and outsiders take place. The women of the island, almost always with a flower in their hair or braids dancing in the breeze, do not hesitate to approach, joke, invite you for a drink, or even to share a moonlit stroll along the sand. They do so not from need, but from desire, from a culture that does not punish sensuality or free connection. For tourists from more reserved societies, this can be a deeply transformative experience. Of course, not everything is idyllic. Belize faces issues such as unemployment, irregular migration, and certain social tensions among ethnic groups. Yet amid all of this thrives a very particular sense of freedom, the freedom to express what one wants, to tell someone you like them without beating around the bush, to build a story even if it lasts only as long as a wave on the shore. That freedom is perhaps the country's greatest allure, because in Belize, love is not a goal, it is a way of life. Courtship customs here do not follow a rigid script. At local festivals, especially during Carnival or Independence Day celebrations, women often dress in bright colors, move with contagious energy, and in many cases are the first to make an approach. A tourist arriving with no expectations can find himself caught in a whirlwind of attention, conversation, and flirtation that is hard to resist. Some women even proudly recount meeting their international partners during a night of laughter, Belikin beer, and impromptu dances on wet sand. In markets, on docks, in family-run restaurants, social dynamics reinforce this naturalness. In Belize, a hello can quickly turn into an invitation to dinner, and a chat about tropical fruits can evolve into a love story worthy of a novel. Because here human contact is direct, sincere, and often charged with intention. Desire is not repressed, it is celebrated, and this is not a new phenomenon. Even in colonial times, British records spoke of the fiery character of Creole and Garifuna women, of their tendency to defy social norms, and of how they managed to attract travelers, soldiers, and missionaries with a blend of tenderness and boldness. That heritage has survived the passage of time and today is expressed by women who not only seek a better future, but also relish the present with intensity. This country, small in territory but immense in nuance, still holds many secrets. Some lie hidden in its jungles, where Maya temples whisper lost rituals. Others among the laughter of young women gazing at foreigners with eyes full of possibility. And still others in the silences of those who fell in love here and never knew how to return to their old lives. Because in Belize, love tastes of sea, smells of sweet fruits, and moves to the drumbeat, and that is hard to forget. In Belize, women are neither secondary nor passive figures. They are the absolute protagonists of daily life. They not only care for the home, but also run businesses, raise their children alone, claim public spaces with magnetic presence, and above all, carry with pride a freedom that distinguishes them from many other Caribbean cultures. To understand the Belizean woman is to understand a powerful blend of heritages: African, Maya, Creole, Garifuna, and even Mennonite, all of which impart a distinct yet equally seductive character to the women who live here. And it is not only a matter of physical beauty, although natural beauty abounds, but of attitude, the firmness of their gaze, that mixture of sweetness and daring that only blooms where social liberation is the norm. Many women travelers who arrive in Belize are surprised by the autonomy with which these women live. Some work as boat captains on island routes, others manage bars with impressive skill, and many more thrive in tourism jobs where charisma becomes their currency. Yet what impacts visitors most is that here, women choose. They choose whom to be with, when to end a relationship, whether or not to have children. In a country where Catholicism shares space with Santeria, Protestantism, Rastafari cults, and other indigenous beliefs, morality is flexible and adapts to individual experience. That is why love is lived without guilt, with a Caribbean freshness that makes it intense, swift, and often unforgettable. It is no coincidence that many Belizean women prefer to start relationships with foreigners. In much of the country, traditional machismo has produced generations of irresponsible men who do not care for their children or who lead lives of excess and familial abandonment. Many women learn from a young age that if they want a different life, they must seek it beyond their neighborhood, their town, and sometimes even beyond their country. That is where the foreigner takes the lead, not only as an exotic figure, but as a promise of something different, perhaps more stable, more committed, more free from local vices. Sometimes that promise is fulfilled, sometimes it is not. But the search remains alive. Outsiders who visit Belize often find themselves disarmed by this directness. A woman might invite you out without hesitation, ask your name in the middle of a street party, or suggest a moonlit walk on the beach before nightfall. There are no power plays or prolonged waits. Time here is fleeting, and so is passion. That is why the moment is seized without guilt, without pressure, without complicated codes. That honesty disarms and also enchants. One of the most interesting phenomena occurs in the markets and public squares of towns like San Ignacio or Dangriga. There, among fruit vendors, fresh fish sellers and artisans, conversations between locals and tourists flow naturally. A woman might sell you a pineapple with a coquettish gesture or offer advice on how to survive the heat while watching you with knowing eyes. It is not unusual that, after a few days, that woman ends up inviting you to her home, introducing you to her family, or even suggesting that you stay longer in the country. In other cultures, that might seem unthinkable. In Belize, it is almost an unwritten oral tradition. Tourists who fall under this spell are not only older men seeking youthful affection, they also include young backpackers, remote workers, expatriates who come for 3 months and stay for years, captivated not by the scenery, but by the human connections that bloom here. The curious thing is that these women do not seek only companionship or financial support, as is often believed elsewhere. They seek affection, exchange, conversation, attention. They want to feel valued in an environment that often overwhelms them with work and obligations. Here, another cultural component comes into play: pride. Despite their hardships, Belizean women do not present themselves as victims. They show strength, determination, and often more maturity than the men who court them. They know what they want, and they do not hesitate to reject anyone who does not meet their standards. This attitude creates a kind of tacit respect. Visitors quickly learn that here one does not come to play. They must show up fully, or women will simply ignore them. In rural areas, such as the Toledo district, the situation shifts slightly. There, many women belong to Maya communities where traditions are more conservative. However, even in those contexts, an increasing openness is palpable, especially among the younger generations. Young women connect through social media, consume international content, and dream of stories beyond their village men. Some even use dating apps to meet foreigners while maintaining their community customs in parallel. That duality between the ancestral and the modern creates a fascinating cultural tension, in which women negotiate freedom with tradition, their desire with norms, and their love with survival. In Garifuna villages like Hopkins, the story is different. Garifuna women, descendants of free African people who resisted slavery, have forged a strong, deeply spiritual identity. They are known for their hypnotic songs, intense dances, and a way of loving that combines devotion and joy. It is not uncommon for a foreigner to fall completely in love with a Garifuna woman after seeing her perform punta, feeling her overwhelming energy, and sharing a night under the moon with her. The emotional connection here is as powerful as the physical, and many of these women maintain an almost mystical dignity that makes them irresistible. And amid all this variety, there is something that unites all Belizean women: the ability to transform the everyday into something extraordinary. A simple meal becomes a feast when she serves it with laughter. A humble house turns into a palace when she opens the door. A rainy day becomes an adventure when she takes your hand and runs with you toward the sea. It is the women who give life to the country, who fill it with stories, possibilities, and reasons to stay. The men who dare to love in Belize discover that here relationships are not based on contracts or labels. They are based on moments. And those moments, no matter how brief, remain etched like tattoos in memory, because few things are as intense as being chosen by a woman who lives with her heart wide open, who does not pretend, who does not calculate. In Belize, love is not a strategy, it is an impulse, and that impulse, when authentic, is worth more than any jewel. While many imagine Belize merely as a Caribbean paradise of virgin beaches and coconut palms, the reality lived in its nights, its rituals, and its least touristy corners reveals a far more fascinating world. Here, life does not revolve solely around tourism or the daily grind. There is a ritual, sensual, festive energy that floods everything, a vibrant pulse you feel in the smallest villages as much as in the bars of K. Kulka or the colonial streets of Orange Walk. And on that stage, men and women act with the freedom of those who owe no explanations to anyone. To truly understand how life is lived in Belize, one must observe its local festivals. These are community events that transcend mere celebration. They are acts of cultural reaffirmation, emotional release, and social conquest. In the Garifuna festivals, for example, the drum is absolute king. Its sound penetrates the skin like hypnosis. The women, dressed in vibrant fabrics, move with ancestral force, guided by percussion, enveloped in a kind of trance. Their movements are not simply dance, they are body language, seduction, declarations of independence. A visitor who allows themselves to be carried away by that rhythm ends up part of a ritual from which it is hard to emerge unscathed or without falling in love. But Belize is not only drums and trances. During carnivals and cultural festivals, such as September celebrations or the Costa Maya festival, another facet of the country is unleashed: joyous abandon, street dancing, unguarded contact. In these events, there are no distinctions of class or age. Young people, adults, elders, tourists all dive into an atmosphere where bodies touch, gazes meet without fear, and invitations to adventure flow as naturally as Belizean rum. The alcohol, by the way, is not merely a complement, it is a catalyst. It helps free inhibitions, erase linguistic differences, and turn the night into a game without rules. And yes, on those nights, fleeting encounters abound. But here, the fleeting is not experienced with sadness. On the contrary, it is celebrated. Immediate pleasure, the brief kiss, the commitment-free embrace, all possess a spiritual value that needs no explanation. The women, aware of their power, know when to draw near and when to step back. They play with the codes without guilt, enjoy attention without false modesty. They do not seek eternal promises. They seek real intensity. And that, for the visitor, can be as disorienting as it is addictive. In areas like Placencia or Ambergris Cay, where luxury tourism blends with local life, a kind of romantic microculture has developed between locals and outsiders. Many of these visitors arrive exhausted from urban stress, virtual relationships, soulless bonds. In Belize, they discover something they believed lost: direct human connection, unfiltered contact, desire without protocols. The local women know this, feel it, and use it to their advantage. Not with cynicism, but with wisdom. Some have had relationships with foreigners that turned into marriages. Others have had transient lovers with whom they still exchange letters or messages years later. There is a living nostalgia in every story, a tenderness that breaks all stereotypes. Still, not everything is romance. Everyday life in Belize also has its shadows. Women, especially in rural areas, must deal with a lack of medical resources, the burden of early motherhood, the repercussions of a precarious educational system. Many are single mothers by choice or abandonment. But what is interesting is how, far from seeing themselves as victims, they turn adversity into strength. A woman may work all day, selling at the market, care for her children in the afternoon, and still find time to go dancing or begin a new romance with the freshness of someone who still believes in love. And that love is expressed in unique ways. Some Belizean women have the custom of preparing traditional dishes for the man they fancy. A stew made of iguana, a conch soup, rice with beans, and coconut milk. These culinary offerings signify much more than a meal. They are clear signals of interest, desire, emotional openness. Whoever receives that dish must not take it lightly. It is, in a way, an intimate invitation, almost a silent ritual. In other cases, love reveals itself through everyday gestures: a walk along the Macall River, a bicycle ride along the coast, a visit to the cemetery to speak with the dead. Because in Belize, death also forms part of social life. Women bring flowers to the departed, but they also talk to them, share their sorrows, ask for advice. It is a way to keep the soul awake, to remember where one comes from and where one is going. And when a tourist participates in those rituals, even without fully understanding them, they begin to become part of a deeper, more spiritual world. Unlike in other Caribbean countries where poverty has driven many women into formalized sex tourism, in Belize that line is more blurred. Yes, encounters for economic interest exist, but they rarely take the form of an explicit business. They are rather ambiguous relationships, where both parties know there are mutual benefits but also genuine affection. The tourist provides gifts, dinners, economic help. The woman offers companionship, joy, sincere affection. There are no contracts, but implicit agreements respected by an unwritten ethic. And the most curious thing is that many times those relationships do not end with the traveler's departure. They continue at a distance through messages, calls, even sporadic visits. Because here, when someone opens their home to you, they also open a door that is hard to close. One of the places where this dynamic is most evident is in Garifuna villages. There, women are guardians of traditions that blend African, indigenous, and Christian elements. They have a special relationship with nature, with spirits, with the body. In some communities, healing rituals include circle dances where bodies touch, push, connect. In those spaces, the visitor is welcome but must leave their prejudices at the door, because here there is no Christian morality limiting physical contact or social rules defining what is right. Everything is governed by energy, by the moment, by the truth of desire. And amidst so much mestizage, so much vital chaos, another way of understanding partnership emerges. It is not unusual for a woman to have children by different men, nor to maintain simultaneous relationships with mutual knowledge. In certain sectors, exclusivity is not an obligation. Honesty, companionship, emotional loyalty are valued more. Although the country still preserves certain patriarchal structures, women have managed to negotiate their freedom within those norms. Some do so openly, others in a more discreet way, but all with a cunning forged by experience. In Belize, women do not wait to be rescued. They do not seek princes or heroes. They look for fellow travelers, accomplices for adventure, witnesses to their inner fire. Whoever dares to cross the emotional border of this country must be prepared for an intensity that does not know half measures. Here, love is not begged for, it is offered, and whoever receives it rarely forgets. In the heart of the Caribbean, Belize remains an enigma. It is not the most visited, the most developed, or the most promoted. But perhaps because of that, it continues to be one of the few countries where life is still governed by the senses. Here, haste does not command, consumption does not define, and happiness is not in what you have, but in who you are. That philosophy is not written in any tourist brochure, but it is breathed in every street, in every smile, in every woman's gaze that with total honesty welcomes you into her unfiltered world. What is fascinating about Belize is that it is a land of contrasts that do not clash. On the same block, you can find a Baptist church, a fruit stand, a reggae bar, and a woman selling natural remedies to attract love or ward off jealousy. The coexistence between the ancestral and the modern is not debated. It is simply accepted. Just as purification rituals with smoke and prayers are celebrated in some villages, in more urban capitals, speed datings are organized so foreigners and locals can meet. That duality does not confuse Belizeans. On the contrary, it strengthens them, and amid that peculiar balance, women play a central role. They are the ones who manage households, lead community initiatives, run markets, raise their children with firmness and tenderness. But they are also the ones who allow themselves to enjoy. They go dancing, flirt without guilt, choose their lovers with the ease of those who know that pleasure is not a sin. Many of them have no academic titles, no great fortunes, no social media presence, but they possess a real magnetism, a confidence that cannot be bought or learned. It is lived. That authenticity has turned Belize into a magnet for a different kind of tourism, not that of grand resorts or superficial luxury. Here arrive men and women too who seek connection, humanity, warmth. People tired of empty relationships, emotional hypocrisy, digital contact. And it is precisely in Belize where they discover that there are still places where you can look someone in the eye, say what you feel, and be heard without judgment. Belizean women do not ask for your bank account or your past traumas. They ask if you dance, if you love the sea, if you believe in dreams, and that simplicity has a transformative effect. Some visitors end up staying longer than planned. Others fall in love and return each year. It is not few who change their entire way of living after spending time in Belize. Because here, one understands that love is not always built on security, but on intensity. That you do not need a luxury house or a contract to form a bond. A shared hammock, an honest laugh, a sunset stroll while the crickets begin to sing are enough, but not everything is idyllic. Belize's beauty also lies in its raw reality. There is poverty, yes. There is inequality, crime, political corruption. There are entire communities living without access to potable water or medical care. Yet even in those difficult realities, people smile, fall in love, dance. Because here, life does not stop for adversity. It adapts. And that capacity to reinvent oneself, to move forward without losing that spark, makes Belize a living lesson in resilience. Women in particular have created informal support networks that replace an absent state. They help one another to care for children, share food, find work, or face a heartbreak. They do not need psychologists. They have godmothers, neighbors, wise aunts. And when a tourist enters that circle, they are no longer a stranger. They become part of an emotional tribe that protects, embraces, and also demands respect. In many villages, the most surprising love stories do not take place in hotels, but in kitchens. There, while a fish head soup simmers or homemade bread fries, confessions are made, adventures begin, wounds heal. A woman may invite you to her home under the pretext of teaching you to cook, but in reality she wants to see if you know how to listen, if you have a soul. She does not want you to save her. She wants to know if you can accompany her without fear. That deep emotional bond also has a physical component without taboos. In Belize, the body is not censored, it is celebrated. Beaches are not only places to sunbathe, they are stages for natural seduction. Kisses arrive with the breeze, embraces with the warm sand. And in that context, women wield their sensuality with mastery. They do not need low necklines or filters. A sustained gaze, a sincere laugh, an intentional touch suffice to begin a story. Some last one night, others a lifetime, but all leave a mark. It is also important to understand that Belize is not a country of conventional loves. Here, open relationships do not scandalize. Free unions are common. There are women who have children with different men and feel proud. There are couples who do not live together yet love each other deeply, and all that coexists with spirituality, faith, devotion to the dead. Because in Belize, you do not choose between the modern and the ancient. You live both at once. One of the most fascinating aspects of the country is how grief is lived. When someone dies, the community does not close itself in sorrow. It celebrates. Parties are held, songs are sung, dances performed in honor of the departed. And many women, amid those ceremonies, find new connections because death, far from ending cycles, opens doors. At wakes, more than one tourist has ended up in love with the deceased sister or consoled by a neighbor whose warmth surpassed mere sympathy. Such is Belize, it asks no permission to mix the sacred with the human. And amid that ordered chaos, amid so much harmonious contradiction, a powerful idea emerges. In Belize, happiness is not a goal. It is a way of life. It does not depend on money, professional success, or social status. It depends on connection with others, contact with nature, freedom to feel. And in that equation, women are the great teachers. Not because they have read many books, but because they have lived intensely. They have loved, lost, resisted, rejoiced. And they transmit all that with every gesture, every word, every caress. Belize is not for everyone. Whoever seeks rigid structures, absolute certainties, or predictable relationships will be frustrated. But whoever arrives with an open heart, willing to be transformed, will find here something that no luxury resort can offer: real humanity. And among palm trees, rum, laughter, and bodies unafraid of desire, it is possible to discover that true luxury is not in what you buy, but in what you feel. Thus ends this journey through Belize, a country where love is not asked for, it is found, where women do not wait to be conquered, they conquer, and where days pass among caresses, drums, shared dishes, and promises that do not always come true, but are always remembered.